Now we're getting into the dense connective tissues. So we've got, this is dense, an example of dense regular connective tissue. The fibers are mostly primary parallel, moving in this one direction parallel to each other, collagen fibers, sometimes a few elastic fibers, and the major cell type here is the fibroblast, which secretes these fibers. These, so dense regular connective tissue are tendons, ligaments, aponeuroses. So these attach muscles to bone or muscles, attach bones to bones, and they have great tensile strength and can withstand lots of force in one direction. Dense irregular tissues don't look as nice and ordered as dense regular connective tissue, so they're irregularly arranged collagen fibers, some elastic fibers, but again the major cell here is the fibroblast. And they're able to withstand tension in many directions, so these provide structural strength. Connective tissues are found in fibrous capsules of organs and joints, the dermis of the skin, and the submucosa of the digestive tract. And then elastic. The elastic tissues are defined by containing a high proportion of elastic fibers, usually made up of the protein elastin. What they do is they allow recoil and stretching of tissue. I already gave you an example of the aorta, but also certain ligaments within the vertebral column and some of the walls of the bronchial tubes as well. Now we're out of the connective tissue proper. So we've got cartilage, bone, and blood. And there's three different types of cartilage. There's hyaline cartilage, elastic cartilage, and fibrocartilage. Hyaline cartilage is amorphous, meaning it lacks a really defined shape, but it's fairly firm. We've got some collagen fibers, but you can't see them very well. And then chondroblasts produce the matrix and then turn into mature chondrocytes, the cells here, that lie in lacunae, or these holes. Hyaline cartilage has a supporting and reinforcing role. It cushions and it resists compressive stress. So when you're developing, it forms most of your embryonic skeleton. It covers and protects the ends of long bones in your joints. And then it's found in the costal cartilage here. It's also found in cartilages, some of the cartilages of the nose, trachea, and larynx. Elastic cartilage is similar to hyaline cartilage, but there's more elastic fibers. And it maintains the shape and structure while allowing a lot of flexibility. So I'll let you see my ear now. You can really move that ear around. So the external ear, or pinna, is mostly made up of elastic cartilage, and so is the epiglottis. It's a piece of cartilage that flaps down when you swallow to cover your trachea, or the opening to your trachea, the glottis. Fibrocartilage is a matrix similar to, but less firm than that in hyaline cartilage, and we've got a lot more collagen fibers. It's got tensile strength, so it can resist pulling, but it can also resist compressive shock. The intervertebral discs have a lot of it. The joint between your pubic bones, the pubic symphysis, is made up of a lot of fibrocartilage, and the discs of your knee joint resist that compressive shock. They have a lot of fibrocartilage as well. Okay, so we're out of cartilage now and into bone. Another word for bone is osseous tissue. So this is another complete class of connective tissue. We've got it differs from cartilage in that it's a hard calcified matrix containing many collagen fibers, and the osteocytes, the cells, lie in these lacunae or pits or holes, and it's very well vascularized. It has a much better blood supply than cartilage does. So bone supports and protects. It provides levers for the muscles to act on, and it also acts as a calcium store for calcium, phosphates, other minerals, and fat. And then inside our bones, in the marrow, that's where most of your blood cells are formed. A whole nother class of connective tissue is blood. You wouldn't think of it as a connective tissue, but it basically it's got a liquid matrix here instead of a solid matrix, and it's made up of red and white blood cells in this fluid matrix called plasma, and it connects your whole body together, a lot of the tissues of your body together. So it functions in transport of respiratory gases, nutrients, wastes, and other substances. And in this class we only briefly touch on blood, and then you spend a whole chapter on it in 206. We'll cover nervous tissue. This is another class of, we're not in connective tissue anymore. We're in a completely separate classification of tissue. We're going to cover nervous tissue a lot more when we get to the nervous system. But there are some defining characteristics of nervous tissue that you should know. They're made up of neurons and neural support cells. That's mainly what makes up nervous tissues. So neurons are these branching cells that have long cell processes on them, and they also contain support cells that really aren't in this picture too much, but they function to transmit electrical signals from sensory receptors to effectors, things that they have an effect on, muscles and glands, and they control the activity of those effectors. I bet you can figure out where nervous tissues are found, and some of the characteristics of a neuron are this cell body or soma has a long projection coming off one side called the axon, and then off the other side we have a branching network of processes called dendrites. Dendrites usually receive incoming messages to the cell. Axons carry electrical signals away from the cell. Again, muscle tissue is another complete class of tissue on its own, and we're going to be covering it in much more detail when we talk about the muscular system. We have three different kinds of muscle tissue: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. Skeletal muscles are long. The cells are really long. Each cell is a muscle fiber. So we've got these long cylindrical multinucleate cells. You can see all these individual nuclei kind of pushed off to the side. And they have these obvious striations that are made up by the muscle fibers. They function, skeletal muscle functions in voluntary movement you can control consciously. Locomotion, manipulation of our environment, facial expression. And they're under voluntary control. We can determine when we move our these muscles. And skeletal muscle is found in your muscles, and it's usually attached to your bones and sometimes to the skin. Cardiac muscle. Again, we'll get into this more in detail when we talk about the heart. But when you look at cardiac muscle, there's some differences to be aware of. It's more branching than the skeletal muscle, which doesn't branch. It's uninucleate, meaning that it has one nucleus. And they're held together by a structure called intercalated discs. These intercalated discs are made up of gap junctions and desmosomes, and they form pop rivets that hold the cardiac muscle together. So whenever the heart contracts and relaxes, it doesn't fall apart. And they also allow ions and electrical signals to pass through all the cardiac muscle and be propagated throughout the heart. This is under involuntary control. Well, again, also like cardiac muscle, you see these striations. So the main function of cardiac muscle is to pump blood. It's under involuntary control. You can't really tell your heart to beat. And it's found in the walls of your heart. Smooth muscle, it's a little different than both skeletal and cardiac. It's and also under involuntary control. You don't consciously control this. You've got spindle-shaped cells here with one central nuclei, no obvious striations, and then the cells form these sheets. It propels substances along internal passageways, so your gut, your gut has smooth muscle in it to propel food down your small intestine, large intestine, to propel urine down your ureters. So it moves stuff down internal passageways. It's also found in the walls of your blood vessels, and it can tighten or open up to modulate the diameter of those blood vessels. So it's mostly found in the walls of hollow organs. Okay, so we'll stop here, and the next video will cover epithelial membranes.